But one topic we mentioned in the introduction was on the reduction of the dietary protein concentration. It's quite an issue worldwide, I would say. And maybe, Mike, you are more idea about that. I know that the swine have maybe ahead a little bit, but I think it's a big issue also in poultry and to reduce the dietary protein concentration.
I think that's a good way to put it. I'm here with the swine nutritionist, and I think they're a lot better than we are. But we have a lot to learn in poultry. We've been working hard over the years and trying to reduce protein, and with each feed-grade amino acid that we're implementing, we have a subsequent decrease in protein, and the work that I've showed here in this graph is something that I started back in the mid-90s with Dr. Brian Kerr, and he and I would look at different protein diet. We created a meta-analysis of data around the world, and we looked at protein and the reductions of nitrogen per se with the effect of protein, and we found that each incremental decrease from adding feed-grade amino acids, say from 21% to 20 or 20 to 19, we had between a 7 and an 8% reduction of nitrogen. So huge benefits for the environment.
Benefits, yeah.
And we just need to determine, because as we lower dietary protein, we're focusing on the first few essential amino acids, and the ones that we call less limiting are now coming more limiting, and we just don't know enough about them to keep going down. So it's something we're continuing to learn on. And with that said, I want to make mention to a publication that Leandro Hackenhar put together, and we did this because there was a lot of controversy as to, okay, fourth limiting amino acid, how do we go to the next step? Because this is the point where L-threonine had gone from an opportunity ingredient to a staple and least cost formulation for broiler rations across the world. And then the question was, well, how do we lower protein more? Well, you go to the fourth limiting amino acid and you optimize that. And we did least cost formulation runs in the diet with corn and soybean, wheat and soybean, sorghum and soybean, fixed amino acid ratios. Long story short, primarily branch change. So valine was fourth limiting in the vegetable-based diets, whereas isoleucine was most limiting in the diets with meat meals. So it's a point where those two amino acids specifically need to be focused on in order to be able to reduce protein going forward. We have the ideal protein concept that we use and that we focus on, and it was established again with the excellent swine nutritionist, but we use it and we focus on it. If we look at the interplay between valine and isoleucine, I think there's some room to fine-tune those responses and the levels we need so we can keep reducing protein, and we probably need to get glycine in the equation as much research is starting to focus on looking at glycine and serine as digestible lysine to total glycine serine. Dr. Dozier's doing most of that work. It's really a nice way to look at it. So we've got to fine-tune these to be able to go to the next level.
It's interesting, and maybe we can challenge the formulator to see how he looks at reducing dietary protein content. And I'm sure that in Europe it's a big issue, but we can ask Lane from Cargill, in fact, what does it mean for him, the reduction of dietary protein content?
Yeah, sure. I'm based in the Netherlands, and I think in the Netherlands it all started. I remember that more than 25 years ago, we already did some trials to find the lowest protein levels for grower and finisher feed for swine. And it's still relevant, and you get more pressure also in countries like Germany, like Denmark, like Belgium, as well on protein as on phosphor. And then of course it's a challenge, which is the next limiting amino acids, and also what I just mentioned, how does the dose response curve look like? Yeah. Because it might be for certain amino acid that the optimal performance is that you need a ratio of 60% for whatever amino acids, but that if you apply 55%, you only have a very small reduction in performance, but a very strong reduction in cost. Because especially if you need to reduce that by including less ingredients, if you have all synthetic amino acids available, okay. you can judge because you know the cost of the synthetic amino acids. It's relatively easy. But if for the amino acids which are not available synthetic, you need to reduce the soya, the rapeseed meal, and so on. The cost will be very high, or it will limit the reduction by a big part. So that's also for new amino acids like isoleucine, for example, that for higher volumes of production, it will be very important that if suppliers can produce it, what will cost be, so that a close cooperation, I would always say, to investigate to produce such amino acids between the feed industry and such suppliers is extremely important to judge how relevant is such an amino acid and how much will it be used and at what cost.
It's interesting, and if I could add another question, Lane, about the taking into account the environmental conditions, because you talk about you are formulating for a lot of countries around the world. So I think it's important also to look at what would be the effect of the extreme conditions and so on these formulation objectives and requirements.
Environmental conditions, high temperature, extremely high temperature, that the whole density of the feed is changing, then the amino acid profile. Maybe the level, but the profile itself may be less, because in such circumstances, in many cases, whole birds are produced instead of breast meat. So less profile, but more density of the feed, and maybe adjusting the level of lysine, but with a fixed ratio of the other amino acids. But indeed, formulas are not copy-paste from the Netherlands to if it is Sudan with extreme temperatures or such type of countries.
Okay, thank you. When thinking about the benefits of dietary amino acids, we always consider the technical aspects. Sometimes we forget the return on investment, and I'm sure Lane has already addressed a little bit that question. Mike, what about the objective if you talk about benefits, economical benefits?
Well, I think that's the formation of where the response comes into play, because we've talked a number of different segments throughout this webinar about so-called requirements and responses and amino acid needs, but clearly you have one chance to put one number in, and that's got to be an economic optimum. So the response that I put up kind of shows that in a perfect world you can do a dose response and get a amino acid need in a given situation, but based on the output, based on the economics, what is going to be the economic optimum. And in this scenario, there's presented digestible valine, isoleucine, and arginine, because I did this for a reason. Because if we take an amino acid like lysine, and we know where the response should be, if we decrease that response in a minimum in formulation, say 5%, we're probably going to get a substantial decrease in feed conversion and meat yield from that response. But if we decrease a less limiting amino acid, 5%, we'll see it immediately in terms of diet cost, but will we see it in terms of performance? So with the economic optimum in play, there's a lot we need to do to balance the diet for performance based on the conditions of the integrator.
I'm sure that Lane will also complement on what you said, because I think they are facing the issue about what is the return on investment, putting more of an amino acid regarding the objectives. I would like also to add a question to Lane, not only the benefit-cost ratio, but also, do we need more information to better formulate on amino acids?
No, I think that information about the curves of the dose response, more information would be welcome. And I can imagine that producers of amino acids like to show where you will receive the maximum performance, and maybe not the optimal or the optimal economical performance, because then you sell less synthetic amino acids. But I think it is important to get the highest profit for integrators, for farmers, for feed mills, to know that information, because it's almost always plateauing at a certain moment, that there's still some response, but what is communicated about it, and if that information is only coming from universities and so on, there's much more information available in the market. A closer cooperation between the two would be more than welcome, because at the end, optimization is always, you have the input of the ingredients, of the nutrients, and the prices. And the part of the prices in many research is not or hardly taken into account, but I think in most cases not taken into account, and it drives the formula at the end.
Yeah, quite interesting. Maybe, you told me that you wanted to give some comments on that.
Yeah, I agree with him a bit, with Elaine. Of course, in research, we're looking at biology, we're looking at biological responses. And they will change, of course, especially in poultry. They have changed tremendously. What changes very rapidly is prices. And of course, we can, as a scientist, if we set up an experimental program and it takes a year or two to do it, and another year to get it published, prices are completely out of the range. So I think it's important to combine two. We can provide a biological response, but the economic context is changing every day. So it's important to re-optimize based on the biological response of the animal.
Absolutely.
Good point.